Starting off as one of the big reasons to think this defense will be better is the defensive line, and night and day. You're talking about a 9-day difference from where this group was a season ago. Last year, you basically reached a point where you were playing 6 guys up front along the defensive line that were even available to play because of the injuries that they had to that unit. They brought in several transfers. I should have had the number in front of me, but I'm not going to count here on the show with how many transfers they ended up bringing in. But they brought in several guys at every single position that they felt can step in and make them better. If nothing else, they needed more depth. They needed more size. The size thing is huge. It's kind of a fun phrasing. The size thing is huge because they got bowled over last year. When Toledo is able to line up and just run at you all day, you have problems. And we saw that with so many teams that they were facing. They just didn't have the guys in the trenches who could hold up. They have gone about addressing that this year. And you look at some of the guys who are expected to be contributors on this unit. Deontay Anderson is up to 280 pounds at defensive end. Rashawn Thomas, a transfer out of NIU, 300 pounds. Red Hibbler, 275, but he's more of a pass rusher. Calvin Dinkins, if he's healthy, is 320. Will Whitson, 295. Jamil Burrows, 330 pounds. Jere Bledsoe, 315. Terrence Hibbler, 310. You just have more size up front than you did a year ago. Having guys, Diesel Moy at 320 pounds. Simply having guys who are 315 plus should help you. Now, I know size isn't everything, but if those are space eaters up front, that's going to help them out. Because, again, you didn't have space eaters up front. And if those guys are just able to open up lanes for those pass rushers to step in and be able to generate – or not pass rushers, the linebackers to be able to step in and go in and make plays, that's going to be massive for what they're going to be able to do. But I do think this is a group that could be more talented. Will Whitson comes over from Coastal Carolina, where he was incredibly productive in the 17 games that he played over 2 seasons with the Chanticleers. And he was on pace – for a big season a year ago before he gets injured, he decides to take his red shirt and sit out the rest of the year and transfer. That's a guy that going into last season was getting some hype as a Senior Bowl watch list player. So a guy that the expectation was 2024 is going to be his last season. He's going to have a big year for Coastal, and that's someone that NFL scouts were showing interest in. That's something Mississippi State didn't have on their defensive line a year ago. So that's a guy who steps in as – it looks like they're going to be playing him kind of as a hybrid defensive tackle, defensive end, probably like a 5 technique type spot, or maybe as a 4-eye. So a little bit more along the interior, but still more – a little bit of – not fully an edge player, but also not like playing in the nose or anything like that. That's clearly a talented guy. That's a guy who has production. Rashawn Thomas is a guy who at NIU put up big numbers over the past 2 years. Now, you're playing in the MAC – but the guy had a lot of production, a bunch of tackles at defensive end. And again, we're talking about a guy who's up to 300 pounds now playing defensive end, which I think that kind of tells you State wanted to get bigger and stronger up front to be able to better stop the run. Red Hibbler comes over from NC State. That's a guy that 2 seasons ago led NC State in sacks. So we talk about being able to generate more of a pass rush. That's a guy who steps in as a defensive end and can help you get better along that spot. I don't think anyone is more interesting than Jamil Burrows, who has not played college football the last 2 seasons. Started his career at Alabama, was a talented player who had some hype coming out of high school, was a contributor on that 2020 national championship team, took a red shirt the next year in 2021. 2022 was a guy who was a regular contributor, and going into the 23 season, the expectation was that was going to be one of Alabama's top defensive linemen. Well, he has an incident in the summer that leads to him leaving the team, goes to Miami. He had to sit out the year because of the transfer rules, but so he didn't get to play the 2023 season, and then kind of seemed like he left the team in 2024. Based on age and based on the fact that he hasn't played in the last 2 years and the last 2 teams he was with, he had to leave. Those are major red flags. Those are very real concerns, which is why when he was added to this team, he wasn't officially added to the team. He joined in the spring on a trial basis. He had to come in and prove himself both as a player who's capable after not playing the last 2 years, but also as a guy, like, have you matured enough that we can trust to have you on a roster? By all accounts, he has taken that opportunity and run with it, and that he recognizes this is my last shot. I need to make the most of it. And he is someone that everyone has talked about had a very good spring. Seems to already have been having a good preseason camp. That's a guy at 6'3", 330 pounds, is massive. And again, just a couple years ago, Alabama was talking about he was going to be a major contributor along their defensive line. Now, that's 2 years ago. Does that still apply now? I don't know. But the talent is clearly there for that guy to be a force at nose tackle. You need someone like that. So if he can step in and he can sort of capture whatever it was he had a couple seasons ago, and he has really made the most of this opportunity, that's someone that's going to be huge for this team up front, both literally and figuratively. And you look at some of the other guys stepping in on the defensive line. Jere Bledsoe, I think there's some excitement there as a transfer out of Texas, just simply adding some depth. Those are all guys that I would expect to contribute. Those are 5 transfers, and I think they're all going to play a role. Then you look at some of the guys returning. Deontay Anderson, the defensive end. This is a fifth-year senior. This is last chance for him. By all accounts, he's had a very good offseason, and he has taken a nice step forward. It's kind of similar when we talk about Trevion Williams, who looks to be playing a little bit more defensive end going into this year as opposed to defensive tackle where he's been so far in his career. The profile was there as a recruit coming out of high school, but this is a guy who is going to be the next big-time defensive lineman at Mississippi State and hasn't lived up to that. Now, how much of that is a product of being on his third defensive coordinator or being in his second different defensive system, dealing with an injury as a redshirt freshman, and then being sort of thrust into a role last year as a part of a struggling unit? I don't know. Maybe his development is simply stunted, and this is a guy that is going to break out and be a big-time player for them this year. But they need him to take the step forward. This is it for him. Kind of like with Deontay Anderson, we're saying, all right, this is it. This is it for Trevion Williams. But the talent is there. Calvin Dinkins is the other guy everyone is really excited about. As I mentioned, he led Mississippi State defensive linemen with sacks last season, playing in one game. Now, he had 1 sack. It's not like he had multiple sacks in that one game. It's more a testament to how pathetic the defensive line was a year ago than it is his ability as a player. But that is a guy that everyone has thought, man, if he could stay healthy, he could do something. The last 2 seasons, though, he has played 2 career games, and he got hurt in both of them. But if he is healthy this time, if he could be a contributor, the belief is that is a guy who could be a big-time player for Mississippi State up front. There's a bunch of excitement there. And then you talk about a guy like Kedrick Bingley-Jones as someone who, last year dealt with injury, and you get him back as sort of a depth piece this year. And you have some younger guys on the roster that have played. Now, Kai McClendon is someone who had to play for you last year as a true freshman that ended up getting hurt in the spring, tore his ACL. We don't know if he's going to be available for State this year. That would be a difficult blow if that is the case, because he was someone that had some flashes for State a year ago, but you weren't expecting him to be a starter. You probably weren't even expecting him to be one of your second-string guys. He was going to be a depth piece for you. And again, he may be able to come back. We don't know yet. But that's kind of a point to all the additions they made in the offseason, is that they have the depth to be able to withstand one of those guys going down, if not a couple. Now, you don't want that to happen. You obviously hope it doesn't. But I look at this room, and it is night and day from where they were a year ago. I think they are going to be better against the run. I think, if nothing else, this is not a unit that should get run over by a MAC team. So Northern Illinois comes to town in week 4. And I talked about NIU. The last episode I did was breaking down the non-conference opponents. And NIU is probably not a great example because of what they're losing along their offensive line. But that's a team that, like I said, they're going to want to run the football and run the football a lot. I don't think they're going to be able to get push on State's defensive line. Famous last words on my part, but I think State's defensive line has improved enough that should be able to handle that. I think the same goes for week 1 in Hattiesburg. I think State's defensive line should be improved enough that these G5 teams are not able to just go and have plenty of success running the football against them. I think it'll be improved enough that you're able to find some pass rush from that unit. And just to give you a chance, if your defensive line is bad, you're not going to be able to field a good defense. It is impossible to. You've got to have the guys up front. Does State have the guys up front to field a good defense or even an average defense? I don't know. Do they have the guys up front that they should not be terrible on the defensive side of the ball? I think they've improved that spot enough to be able to take that step forward.
Absolutely. I would say they have the talent there to be average, possibly at best.